I never thought a Tuesday evening could feel like the start of something I wasn't ready for. But there she was, leaning against the kitchen counter, a warm glass of wine cradled in her hand, sunlight slanting through the blinds and catching the faint silver streaks in her hair. I couldn't help staring. She was beautiful in a way that made you forget how old she was, or maybe reminded you that experience only sharpened that beauty. I had come over to grab a few textbooks I'd left at her house during a study session with my friend. I knew she'd be there, but I didn't expect, whatever this was. Whatever flutter I felt every time she smiled at me, that slight tilt of her head, the way her eyes lingered longer than they should. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice caught in my throat when she looked up at me. She wasn't just friendly, there was something in her gaze, soft, steady, and maybe just a little dangerous. "Hey," she replied, her voice low, like she was keeping secrets she didn't intend to share. She took a step closer to hand me the stack of papers I'd left on the counter. Our fingers brushed for a second, and then a little longer. Too long. My heart skipped. I told myself it was nothing. Just a hand passing through, nothing more. But she didn't pull back. Instead, she kept her hand there, curling her fingers around mine for a beat that stretched too long to be innocent. I tried to focus on the papers, but I could feel the heat from her hand spreading up my arm. "You've grown," she said suddenly, with a soft chuckle that made me flush. "I mean, not just taller. More. I don't know, serious, I guess." I laughed awkwardly, trying to hide the tension in my chest. "Yeah, college does that to you." My words felt hollow, though. I wanted to say more, wanted to tell her that every time she looked at me like that, I lost track of all the careful lines I'd drawn for myself. But I didn't. There was a pause, and she didn't move her hand. I could feel the weight of her gaze now, and the quiet of the house seemed louder than usual, the hum of the fridge, the distant sound of cars outside. The air between us held something unspoken, a risk we both knew but didn't name. "I should probably get going," I said finally, though either of us made a move to break contact. Her hand remained warm, heavy with intent, and I couldn't look away. "Sure," she murmured, but she didn't let go immediately. Instead, she tilted her head toward me, and in that glance, I saw a question, curiosity, maybe longing, maybe something dangerous. I didn't know. I didn't want to know. And then, just as the moment threatened to stretch into something I wasn't ready to admit I wanted, the doorbell rang. A sudden, sharp sound that made us both jump, like the universe reminding us that the world outside existed, that we couldn't linger in stolen seconds forever. She released my hand, but only slightly, and turned toward the door, her expression unreadable. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware that my pulse was thrumming in my ears, that every inch of me was awake and aware of her presence in ways I wasn't supposed to admit. I wanted to say something, anything, but all I managed was a quiet, "I'll wait." Her lips curved in a brief, knowing smile as she moved toward the door. And in that instant, I realized I had no idea what was coming next, but I knew I wanted to find out. The doorbell had barely faded when I realized we were both still standing there, an invisible thread keeping us connected. She had opened the door to an empty hallway, just the sound of the wind outside and the faint hum of traffic, but the air between us felt heavier, charged. I lingered, unsure whether to leave or stay, caught somewhere between the polite world I belonged to and the dangerous one she had opened up with a single touch. She caught my hesitation with a soft, knowing look, and I felt a flicker of guilt. She was my friend's mom, the woman who had taught me to ride my bike as a kid, the one I'd always thought of as untouchable. Now, her hand had brushed mine, and I couldn't erase the memory. "Do you want some tea?" she asked, breaking the silence. The casualness of her tone didn't match the tension in her eyes. I nodded, following her to the kitchen, feeling like a trespasser in my own longing. While she prepared the tea, I tried to remind myself why this was all a bad idea. She had been through a marriage that ended messy, the kind of divorce that left scars you couldn't hide behind a smile. I knew the look in her eyes, the quiet vulnerability she tried to mask with laughter, because I'd seen it before, in my own small heartbreaks. I wanted to tell her I understood. I wanted to reach for her hand again, to tell her everything I shouldn't. She handed me the cup, and our fingers brushed once more. This time, I didn't pull away. She noticed, of course, because she gave me that half-smile, the one that held a secret neither of us were ready to voice. "You've changed," she said softly, almost to herself. "When you were a kid, I don't know, you were just you. Now you're grown." I looked down at my tea, feeling the heat between my palms, and swallowed. "I guess life kind of forces that on you," I said, hoping I sounded casual. My mind, though, was a storm. I couldn't stop thinking about how long her fingers had lingered on mine, how safe and dangerous it felt all at once. She leaned against the counter, eyes distant for a moment, like she was weighing something she shouldn't. "I sometimes wonder if I did things differently, maybe I missed out on things I could have had." Her words hung in the air, fragile and trembling, but filled with longing I wasn't supposed to see. I wanted to answer, to tell her that she hadn't missed anything yet, that maybe some opportunities were still waiting. But instead, I just lifted my cup, fingers brushing hers again, and let the silence speak. There was a shared memory in that touch, the way she had comforted me after my first heartbreak, the way she laughed at my terrible jokes when I was 15, the way I had secretly admired her from a distance for years. And now, here we were, in a quiet kitchen, teetering on the edge of something neither of us could fully name. She looked up, and for a second, the world shrank down to just us. I felt my heart hammer, my chest tight with things I shouldn't feel, yet couldn't ignore. Then, as if sensing the weight of the moment, she reached over and lightly brushed a stray strand of hair from my forehead, a gesture so intimate, so impossible to categorize, that I had to close my eyes to keep from saying something I'd regret. And just like that, I knew I was already lost. I was halfway through telling myself to leave, really leave, when I heard a knock at the front door. My stomach dropped. Not the doorbell, this was different. It was insistent. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, tense. "That's my ex," she muttered, almost under her breath. My chest tightened. I hadn't even considered that someone could walk in and shatter the fragile, charged bubble we'd been hovering in. I debated bolting, but my feet were glued to the floor. She moved closer to me, just slightly, so that our shoulders brushed. The warmth hit like fire, but there was fear there too, fear of being seen, of being judged. I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice died. She leaned toward me, close enough that I could feel her breath, soft and subtle. For a split second I thought we might, and then the knock came again, sharper this time, and reality slammed back. Her hand found mine instinctively, gripping it tightly. Not just a touch anymore, something protective, claiming, urgent. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure the ex could hear it through the walls. "I'll get it," she whispered. Her tone was calm, but there was an undercurrent of panic I could feel. She pressed her hand against mine for a fraction longer before pulling away, and I swore the pulse in my fingers lingered long after. She opened the door a crack, enough to speak in a low voice. I couldn't hear what she said, but I caught the strained edge in her tone. Then she returned, closing the door slowly, her eyes locking with mine. There was something unspoken in that glance, a mixture of relief, fear, and something darker. Desire, maybe, or guilt, or both. We stood there, the kitchen suddenly too small, too close. My pulse was raging. I wanted to step back, to leave, but I couldn't move. She shifted subtly, brushing against me again, not deliberately, I told myself, but every nerve in my body screamed that it was deliberate. "I shouldn't, this is wrong," she murmured, almost as if talking to herself, her voice trembling slightly. I know, I whispered back, though the words felt useless. I wanted more than just acknowledgement. I wanted to tell her that wrong could feel like everything I'd ever needed. But I stayed silent. Then, impossibly, she leaned closer, just a breath away from my face. I could feel the warmth of her lips, see the flicker of hesitation in her eyes. And before I could stop myself, before either of us could decide, the sound of a text pinged on my phone. My friend. A single line, casual, oblivious. Hey, you there? Mom's asking about you. My stomach lurched. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, we were both acutely aware of the danger, the taboo, the undeniable pull between us. And yet, in that pause, in that shared tension, nothing else mattered. Not rules, not ages, not guilt, just a magnetic, terrifying connection holding us inches apart. I wanted to lean in. I wanted to run. And somehow, I knew we were both thinking the same impossible thing, that I hadn't moved for what felt like hours. The ping of my friend's message still echoed in my mind, but it was drowned out by the thrum of my own heartbeat. She stood across from me, fingers still brushing the edge of the counter, eyes wide but shimmering with something I couldn't name. I can't, she whispered suddenly, shaking her head. I can't do this. You're. Her voice cracked, faltering. I wanted to fill in the blank for her. You're too young. Too, my friend's son. Too dangerous for me to want like this. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped closer, and she flinched, not away, but just enough to remind me of the razor-thin line we were walking. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. I've never felt this way, she admitted. Her hands twitched, betraying her calm exterior. Not like this. Not with someone so young. Not. She cut herself off, lips pressed tight, eyes darting away. I could see the conflict etched into every line of her face. The longing, the fear, the guilt, it was all there, swirling in a storm she wasn't ready to face. And I realized, painfully, that I wasn't ready either. I wanted her, yes, but I also wanted her safe. Wanted her whole. I hated that my desire could threaten her, that just wanting her felt selfish. I know, I said softly. My fingers hovered near hers, almost brushing the hem of her sleeve. I know it's wrong. I know all of it. But I can't stop thinking about you either. Her gaze snapped back to mine. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed. I saw something flicker in her eyes, desire, yes, but also fear. Vulnerability. And maybe, trust. A sharp noise from the living room, her phone buzzing, another text, maybe a call, made her flinch. She reached for it, but stopped, letting it vibrate against the table, ignored. Her hand lingered near mine, trembling, as if asking permission to stay. I shouldn't, she said again, quieter this time, almost a plea. I can't, not like this. You can't, I breathed. You can. You just don't want to admit it. She laughed, soft, broken, almost bitter, and I could hear the weight behind it. Years of restraint, of knowing what she should do, of hiding herself. And yet, here we were, standing in a small kitchen, two people teetering on the edge of something that would change everything. She stepped back slightly, but her fingers lingered near mine. I could see her pulse at her wrist, the way her lips parted slightly, the tiny hitch in her breath every time I moved an inch closer. We were both frozen, held by the same invisible force neither of us could resist or rationalize. And then, just as I was about to close the distance, to do something irreversible, there was a sound at the door. A key turning. Someone coming home. We froze, inches apart, hearts pounding, breaths mingling. And in that instant, I realized the moment was slipping away. The moment where we could finally surrender to everything we were feeling, or lose it forever. The key in the lock rattled again, slower this time. My pulse jumped. We both froze. Her ex. Or maybe worse. She glanced at me, panic and something else, something raw, flashing in her eyes. You, stay here, she hissed, pulling me behind her with a hand that trembled slightly. Her touch was brief but electric, and I felt it sear straight through me. The door opened, and there he was, smiling in that infuriating, familiar way. Hey, you too, he said casually, unaware, or pretending to be, of the tension crackling in the kitchen. She swallowed, stiffened, and for a moment, I almost panicked. I wanted to step back, hide, pretend none of this had happened. But even as her ex drifted toward the living room, my gaze found hers, and I saw it, the tiny flicker of rebellion, the defiance behind her calm mask. I thought I told you not to, she began, but her words caught. She didn't finish the sentence. I realized then she was protecting me. She'd chosen, without speaking, to shield me from a world that didn't yet know what was happening between us. My chest tightened. Protect her? But from what? Me? From herself? From something far worse? Her ex laughed softly from the other room, oblivious. Or so we thought. And then came the sound that nearly made me drop to the floor, a voice from upstairs, cutting through the house like a blade. My friend. Hey! Mom! Who's here? Everything collapsed in an instant. She turned to me, eyes wide, jaw tight, and for the first time, vulnerability stripped away every mask. You can't, he can't know. I stammered, panic rising, but she put a finger to my lips. Just a soft, almost pleading gesture. Not a word. Not a look. Please. I nodded, but inside, the twist gnawed at me. This wasn't just about desire anymore. Every inch of closeness, every stolen glance or touch, had become a risk far greater than I'd imagined. One wrong move, one slip, and everything, friendship, trust, our fragile secret, could shatter. I realized then how much she carried, how much she had endured. The divorce. The loneliness. The constant balancing act between what she wanted and what she had to protect. And I was about to crash into it headlong, young, naive, and utterly unprepared. Her hand found mine again, just for a second, a lifeline in the storm. We'll figure it out, she whispered, barely audible. But even as she said it, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the hesitation in her eyes. She wasn't sure. I wasn't sure. And yet, despite the chaos, despite the ex, despite my friend upstairs, despite everything that screamed we shouldn't, there was that magnetic pull. That unspoken promise that if we survived this moment, if we could navigate the storm, maybe, just maybe, something real could exist. But first, we had to survive the next few minutes without being caught out. We retreated into the kitchen, the only safe corner of the house where the tension between us could breathe without immediate danger. My friend's distant voice faded into the background, replaced by the rapid beat of our own hearts. She leaned against the counter, eyes fixed on the floor, jaw tight. For the first time, I saw her fear, not the playful kind, not the controlled composure she always carried, but raw, unfiltered fear. Fear of judgment, fear of scandal, fear of what she wanted as much as she feared it. I swallowed and stepped closer. You don't have to do this alone, I said, though my own voice shook. I reached for her hand, hesitating a fraction, then gently intertwined my fingers with hers. The gesture was simple, human, but it carried 1,000 words neither of us dared speak aloud. Her gaze lifted to mine. I could see everything reflected there: longing, guilt, uncertainty, and a fragile spark of hope. I shouldn't, she whispered. Her lips trembled, and I felt the weight of all the restraint she had carried for years. I know, I said softly. But maybe some things are worth the risk. She laughed quietly, bitter and sweet all at once, shaking her head. You're reckless, she said, though her eyes lingered on mine, betraying every word. I'm willing to be reckless, I replied. If it means this, if it means you. Her chest rose sharply, and she exhaled slowly, letting a moment pass that felt like it stretched into eternity. Then, in a quiet, unguarded instant, she leaned in. Not all the way, just close enough that our breaths mingled, and I felt the faintest warmth of her lips near mine. For a heartbeat, the world contracted. All the fear, all the rules, all the chaos faded. We were two people, exposed, trembling on the edge of something we could no longer deny. And then, almost impossibly, she pulled back slightly, her forehead resting against mine. I'm terrified, she admitted. I am too, I whispered. And in that admission, in the vulnerability and honesty we both shared, something shifted. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't safe. It wasn't neat. But it was real. We stood there, hand in hand, foreheads touching, breathing in the same air. The danger hadn't gone away, the ex, my friend, the world outside, but for the first time, it felt like we could face it together. A soft laugh escaped her, and I matched it with my own. It wasn't relief. Not entirely. But it was something closer to hope than we had dared to feel before. And just as we finally allowed ourselves to stay in that fragile bubble, the front door clicked. Someone coming home. Someone who might destroy everything, or maybe give us the space we needed. I didn't know what would happen next. We could be caught, forced apart, judged, or forgiven. But I did know one thing: right here, right now, we understood each other. And that, I realized, was everything. The front door remained closed, the quiet settling like a gentle exhale. We stood in the kitchen, hands still intertwined, eyes locked. The chaos of the past hours, the ex, my friend, the impossible tension, felt distant now, almost unreal. For the first time, the fear was still there, but it no longer had the power to control us. She let out a slow breath, a laugh barely above a whisper. I can't believe we're doing this, she said, shaking her head with that familiar mix of mischief and disbelief I had loved for years. After everything. I didn't think it would feel like this. Right. It doesn't have to make sense, I replied, smiling despite myself. It just feels right. Her eyes softened, lingering on me in a way that made my chest ache. I saw all the years, the regrets, the quiet nights of longing she had hidden from the world, and somehow, she had trusted me enough to let me in. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough to take a step with her. We moved closer, not hurriedly, not with reckless abandon, but carefully, savoring the fragile, delicious tension. When our lips finally met, it wasn't a fiery explosion, it was gentle, real, and human. A promise whispered in contact, a confession without words. I felt her shiver against me, and I shivered too, not from fear, but from recognition. Recognition that this, whatever it was ours. Afterward, we lingered, foreheads touching, hands brushing, savoring the silence that spoke louder than any words. Outside, the world continued, oblivious to the delicate thread we had finally grasped. And I realized that love, real, messy, impossible love, wasn't about perfection. It was about courage. About moments like this, where you risk everything for something worth having. She leaned back slightly, smiling softly, eyes glimmering. So, what now? I shrugged, grinning. We take it slow. We figure it out. Together. Her hand squeezed mine, and in that simple gesture, every fear, every hesitation, every heartbeat that had led us here was answered. Together. It was enough. And as we finally allowed ourselves to step out of the kitchen, away from the chaos, away from the threat of discovery, I realized the truth: love doesn't always make sense. Sometimes it's risky. Sometimes it's unexpected. But sometimes, it's the most real thing you'll ever feel. And in that quiet, stolen moment, I knew we had found something neither of us would ever let go of. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?